Welcome to the lab. Today we're making a custom sandpaper cutter that'll work for the prepping weapon and also for a palm sander. The design's fairly simple. There's a hacksaw blade that cuts the sandpaper, and I've inlaid some walnut strips that act as a ruler. The inlay locations are fully customizable, so if you don't have a prepping weapon or a palm sander, you can adjust their location to accommodate any of your sandpaper cutting needs. The build starts by cutting my stock down to about 14 inches on the chop saw. Once my stock is cut down to rough length, I can go ahead and join and plane my material. Once squared, I rip my stock down to 6 inches. Next, I go ahead and set the height of my table saw blade to 1/8 of an inch. Once my blade is set to the appropriate height, I cut the grooves for my inlays. Time to cut the stock for my inlays. When setting my fence, I go ahead and use a gauge block that's identical to the width of my table saw blade. I cut my strips just oversized since I'm going to send them through my thickness sander. Once my stock is brought to thickness, I can go ahead and glue it into place. To keep my inlays in place, I use something heavy to weigh them down. Once dry, I go ahead and cut my piece to final length, which is 12.5 inches. My inlays were super proud, so I went ahead and used the bandsaw to remove the bulk of the material. Once my inlays were at a reasonable height, I used a block plane to flush them up. And for good measure, I run it through the thickness sander. The last part needed is a small strip for the fence. This fence will serve as a secondary way to square up your sandpaper. I used my sheeting board to eliminate the saw marks on the end grain. After that, I can go ahead and mark my screw locations. Since my fence is running across the grain, I go ahead and drill my holes slightly oversized to allow for wood movement. Before I screw my fence down, I do a quick interior sand. I mark my screw locations by holding the stock in place and drilling through. Another option for locating your holes is using a transfer punch. Place in the hole, hit it with a hammer, and you'll have a mark exactly where you need to drill. Once my holes are drilled, I can go ahead and screw my fence into place. I square up my fence before driving in my second screw. After I install my fence, I sand my piece in preparation for finish. For my finish, I've opted to use Rubio Monocoat. It's super durable and super easy to apply. The final step of the build is installing a hacksaw blade. I place washers on the bottom side of the hacksaw blade. This gives it a little lift, in turn making it easier to slide sandpaper under. And that's it for this build. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time in the lab.